Good afternoon. My name is Preeti, and I work for the Football Foundation. Apologies, first of all, that I haven't learned Hebrew yet. But if you have any questions or you don't understand anything, my colleague Noam is sitting there, and he speaks Hebrew, so he will be happy to translate or to talk about anything. Before I go into this today, I heard a really funny saying yesterday. Somebody told me there's a saying that says that you shouldn't interrupt an Israeli while he's interrupting you, which I found really funny. So just to say, if anybody has any questions, we'll do questions at the end, but feel free to raise your hand and interrupt me, and I think it's completely fine. So my name is Preeti, and I work for the Football Foundation. The Football Foundation is the UK's largest sports charity. We're funded by the Premier League, the Football Association, and the government. Back in 2009, we were giving away about £50 million a year to various different organizations to increase participation in sport through capital investments, so building 3G pitches, changing rooms, floodlights. But also we had a strand that was called community grants, so using sport to tackle a social issue, which is similar to some of the stuff we've been talking about today. We're predominantly a funder, so we get our money from our three funders, and we give that money out to professional clubs, to community groups, to schools, to various NGOs, only within the UK. As a funder, we used to ask for an annual report, which we used to get back, as you can imagine, in 2009 in a variety of different formats. So lots of paper at the time, and then some of the medium-sized ones had Excel documents. They would send us all of their data. Some of the bigger ones had staff who would send all their information in. They had fancy systems. But what we were really struggling with is we would get these reports at the end of the year that said, we've engaged with 500 children this year. And we said, okay, that's great, but so what? What does that mean? You've engaged with 500 people. What is the outcome of that? We felt at the time that everybody was spending so much time just collecting information, collecting data, doing admin, that they didn't have time to do the job that they really wanted to do, which is go out and coach or go out and work at a community organization. So we looked around and we said, right, how are we going to fix this as a funder? And we didn't really find anything that worked. So we decided that we were going to build our own system, an online system that was going to help us measure our impact as a funder, but also help the organizations that we worked with to make it easier for them to put information in. Now, it wasn't a very popular decision. We're a sports charity. We know nothing about technology or software. But we decided that this is something that we wanted to do. So we went out and we talked to the organizations that we funded. We talked to other sports. We talked to NGOs. We talked to a wide range of organizations. And we said, what are the issues that you have when it comes to monitoring, when it comes to data? These are some of the things that they said. Now, as you can imagine, when you ask somebody what their problems are, everybody wants to talk to you. So we have pages and pages of these quotes and these notes. A lot of people said things like, I spend more time doing paperwork than actually running my project. It's too complicated. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't have any resources. My staff are too busy. I have many different funders, and everybody wants something completely different. How am I supposed to do this? The one that we really stuck on was that one that's circled in the middle. If there was direct benefit to us, we'd be more willing to do it. And at that point, we said, you know what, that's right. Because our coaches on the ground, our volunteers who are actually putting in this information, they don't often understand why they're doing it. It feels like a job. It feels like somebody, their boss, is telling them to do it, so they do it. So we said, if we can show them why they're doing it, if we can show them that we do this because we want to make ourselves better, because we want to access more funding, then they're more likely to do it. So we had a brief. As the Football Foundation, as a grant giver, as a funder, we knew what we wanted. We wanted real-time information. We wanted to know if we were putting money in the right places. We wanted to know how we could help. But we focused on our grant recipients, so the people delivering, our delivery organizations. Really two things: make their lives easier and give them a tool to secure additional funding. Because that's why we do this. When we run great projects, we want more money so we can continue running them. So we built Upshot. Obviously, it wasn't that simple. It's been a big learning curve for us over the last couple of years. We launched officially in 2012, so about 4 years ago. We use it in-house, so we use it as a funder within the foundation. But we also work externally, so we've got just over 550 organizations in the UK and internationally who all use our system and work with us so they can evidence their impact and they can get more money from other funders. 2 key points about the system. It's all online, so it's cloud-based. You can access it from any computer, any laptop, any tablet. We have a special app. So your coach can be on the pitch doing his session. He does his attendance, who came, who didn't come, finished, and he doesn't need to go back to the office to do his work. So really taking out some of that difficulty with entering information. Because we were a funder, we wanted 2 platforms. So we've got what we call a funding platform, which sits on top, and then a delivery one, which sits below. So for funders, you can get a bird's eye view, a feed of all of the data that your projects are running, but they have the flexibility to be independent, so they can have their own logo, their own colors, they can run their own programs, but there's consistency across everything. We have a lot of organizations, a lot of projects who are just delivery, and they just use their own system, and they use that to report back to everybody and to evidence the good stuff they're doing. So, we talk about monitoring and evaluation, which isn't a very popular subject. Lots of people think it's very dry. But what I wanted to talk about was the benefit of doing it. Why are we talking about this? Why do we think that this will help you get more money, help you be better? The question really to ask is, do you know? Do you know what your reach is? Do you know the difference that you're making to your young people's lives, to their communities? Do you know the return on investment? If you're asking for money, do you know why funders should fund you? Actually, I think the answer is yes. I think all of you probably do know. You know because you see it every single day. Because you know that quiet kid who is now really confident. You know because you come from these communities and you see the difference it's making. You know because you're running programs that are innovative, that are unique. So the question really isn't whether you know. The question is, can you prove it? Because unfortunately, whether you know or not, your funder is sitting somewhere else, the people who have the money, they need to be able to see it through your eyes. So what I wanted to do is give you some steps, some tips that you can use if you're on the beginning of your journey or halfway through or even at the end. What you should focus on in order to measure your impact and in order to get more money. The first and the most important step is to plan. Before you do any of these things, you need to set clear aims and objectives to understand what you're trying to achieve. Focus on not just the outputs, but the outcomes. Now, outputs are really important, so trainings, the workshops you deliver, the sessions you run, your programs, the resources you put in, that is important. But what's even more important is the outcomes, the knowledge you're learning, the behaviors you're changing, the attitudes you're improving. The actual long-term effect that your projects are having on people in their communities. The next step is to start collecting good data. You can't do any of this if you don't have the data to prove it. You can collect 2 kinds of data. You've got quantitative, so what, where, when, the numbers, attendances, the names of people, date of births, that kind of thing. And then you've got the qualitative, which is opinions, the values, the thoughts, the trends, these insights that you're seeing. How are people feeling because they're coming to your programs? Your impact. So you've collected all this good data, you know where you're trying to get to. What are we doing then? We're seeing what works and what doesn't work. That is actually why you should be evaluating your programs. Yes, it's about funding, but it's about knowing if you're being effective or not. So you're looking at your successes, and if something is working, you replicate it, you scale it. But more importantly, if something is not working, you look at failure. Failure is a really powerful thing. You look at what isn't working, and you change it. So I wanted to give you a couple of examples of organizations that we have been working with. Out of our 550, these are 3 great organizations that are measuring their impact in a way that is enabling them to prove what they're doing, to get more money, to give out more money, and to raise awareness. The first is the Football Association, which some of you might have heard of. We work with the FA on 2 major programs, the Disability Workforce Fund and then a further education program. Now, the Football Association is committed to developing all areas of disability football within the UK and increasing participation levels at every stage. They do this by working with their county FAs, which is like a local football association at a district level or a region. Now, the Football Association funds a disability officer in every single county FA to ensure that they all work together, they create more opportunities for disabled people to play football, and to positively impact the growth of their sport within these disability groups. They run a very similar scheme with further and higher education programs, so universities and colleges, where they fund student activators who will sit within these colleges and universities to increase participation in football, to encourage students to work with their communities, and to ensure that competitive and recreational football is being played at the highest level. Now, we work with the FA. They use Upshot, they use our system, because they are getting this bird's eye view. Every single county FA and university has their own Upshot. They use it for each of their programs independently, but the FA gets a feed of what's going on, although the FA's feed is anonymous. And now the FA is able to say what's happening with disability football and educational football all over the country. Suddenly they have real-time information so they can help where help is needed, and they can celebrate when things are going well. My second example is an organization called Fight for Peace. Fight for Peace is a brilliant international sport for development organization that combines boxing and martial arts with education and personal development to help young people that are affected by crime, violence, and social exclusion. We work with Fight for Peace in Brazil, Jamaica, South Africa, and the UK, and Fight for Peace works in many, many other countries. You'll see on the screen there some of their outcomes. They've got quantitative, hard numbers. They know how many of their young people are getting into jobs. They know how many have got qualifications, but they're also looking at the softer stuff. 79% felt safer and more confident. 68% felt happier about themselves. Fight for Peace is doing this brilliantly. They use Upshot to record all their hard and soft data, but they're telling the whole story. So when their funders look at this, they're not just seeing one aspect. They're seeing the actual impact that's being made not only on one kid's life, but on the lives of their families, their communities in Rio, their favelas. So you're seeing long-lasting change. My third example is the Mayor of London. That is a picture of City Hall, which is where our mayor works. The Mayor of London, the Football Foundation has a very long history of working in partnership with the Mayor of London. One of the mayor's priorities is to get more Londoners playing sport and to reduce inactivity. Now, their main focus is people with disabilities, women, and people over 40, who are considered the most in need in terms of inactivity, at least in London. Now, they do this by investing in grassroots sport projects in all of the London areas. This program is really unique because each project is completely different from the other. We have a BMX project in South London. We have a dance project in Northwest London. We have a walking football project in East London. We work with championship football clubs like AFC Wimbledon and Crystal Palace and Leyton Orient. All of these organizations are all coming together for one common goal. And what the Mayor of London does is they're able to look at this data, they're able to see what's happening, track progress, where should they give money, what parts of London have the most need, are we targeting the right areas and the right people? So it's making them better funders, but it's making the projects themselves better deliverers as well. It's a partnership. We can't do this alone. Now, each of our organizations that works with us and uses Upshot, we enable them to do both, quantitative and qualitative. The numbers are important. We need to know what these are. So within the system, you're able to collect your attendances and hours delivered and number of hours your coaches have done and all of that stuff automatically. The system will count it. It will track your progress. But some of the stuff that we really wanted to focus on was creative evaluation, the detail about your participants. One of the ways we do this is through somebody's timeline. Every single person has their own profile. Your coach, your volunteer, your participant. It's a bit like Facebook. You put pictures on it. You can put surveys that they've done, their qualifications. You add notes. It's their story that you're telling over the period of time they've engaged with you. Now, because it's by date, it starts to fill up. And what you really get is a bit of a case study. So I can download this report on Microsoft Word, and I get their story, which is great for my funder because it's a human interest piece. I give it to my funder and say, you want to know what difference we're making? Look at the story of Adam or Khalid. And that makes a real difference. But this also works really well for your own organization. Imagine giving it to a volunteer or a participant, a child. It's like a mini CV. It's like a report card. You're saying, look at everything you did since you were with us. Yes, you did X hours and you got this qualification and now you play more football, cricket, tennis, whatever it might be. But look at everything else that happened along the way. Another way you can measure some of these behavior change aspects, confidence, leadership, well-being, is by surveys. We built our own survey function. We think it's a really useful tool for you to measure some of your impact. You can write your own questions, you feed it in. You can have surveys that you already use, questionnaires that you use. We do a lot of work with our organizations where we help them with the questions. But if you're working with external evaluators, then you can get them to validate your surveys and put them in as well. What the system does is it analyzes the results for you. So you feed in the answers and it will tell you that 20% said they feel more confident, 30% said they want to come back, 10% said they'll never come back. So then it's about figuring out what you've done wrong. Why would they never come back? You can also measure the difference between a pre and a post. So you send everybody a survey in the beginning, send them one at the end, and the system will automatically count the change that's been affected. Now that is quantifiable. You go to a funder and you say, this is why you should fund us. Because I have 500 children engaging in my program, and 70% of them have said they feel more confident since they've been in my 12-week session. That is impact. One of our most popular features is our mapping function. We are big fans of making data look fun and visual. We appreciate that it's very boring to talk about data. So as much as possible, we try and bring this to life. Our mapping feature takes from personal postcodes and locations. So the little green bits are the different locations we deliver, for example, and the little icons are the people. Now, we link this in the UK to government data, so census data. And we're able to say, are we working in areas of high crime or low employment? Are our participants coming from communities that have the most need, that have certain disabilities, certain ethnicities? We're able to see whether we should be delivering sessions in X location or Y, because suddenly this data is telling us things we didn't already know. And if you're working in a particular region, city, country, it's showing your reach. It's showing how far you're actually going, how far you're impacting a certain community or a certain group of individuals. Now, everybody's different. Government funders, traditional funders will want reports. They want numbers and a combination of softer stuff. But if you're working with sponsors, if you're working with corporate CSR schemes, for them that stuff is less important. They're less concerned about the impact that you're making on a bunch of people's lives. What they want is to celebrate your successes. They want to be part of something. So we have a media library within the system where you upload photos on your phone or videos or YouTube links or whatever you're doing. It all gets put into one place and it's all categorized. I can share on Facebook, I can put it on my website, I can send it to my funder, I can give them access. Suddenly you start to see that all this stuff that we have on our phones, we have in our offices, now we're using it. The next time I want to write a press release or a funding bid to do with leadership or confidence, I do a quick search and I see all this stuff that all my coaches, my volunteers have uploaded. Everything in one place, now I'm using everything. So, To summarize, I really wanted to look at what funders are looking for. We come from the perspective of a funder, but we work with over 550 organizations that we don't fund, that have other funders. So there's a lot of experience that sits here. What I wanted to do was give you some next steps, things that you should be looking at if you want to measure your impact, if you want to access more funding. The first is evidence of impact. Now, grant making, giving out money, it's an art. It's really not a science. We get thousands of applications from projects that are all amazing. Everybody is good. Everybody is dealing with a worthy cause. So what makes you stand out? Why should we give you the money and not the project next to you? Sometimes what this comes down to is there's two applications and they're both great. We will give money to the one that can prove evidence of impact. If you can show us that you are genuinely making a difference, it's an automatic decision, you will get the money. So it's really worth thinking about that. Focus on outcomes, not outputs. I'm going to say it again because it is really important. Outcomes are the difference that your outputs are making. So you're putting all this effort in, these resources, these hours, these sessions. What is happening because of that? Think long term, think about sustainability. Because at the end of the day, no funder wants to fund a project that may not be around next year, or they don't know what they're doing, or they don't know where they want to go. So it's thinking of your plan and your long-term goals ahead of time. A great way to do this is to combine your statistics and your anecdotal evidence. Too much of one or too much of the other doesn't really make any sense. So get your numbers, get your hard data, and then combine it with your stories and your softer stuff. The most powerful thing you can do is hear from your participants themselves. There is nothing more powerful than getting your beneficiaries, your kids, your young people to talk about how their lives have been impacted. I mean, it's exactly what you just said. This week, it's been really fascinating. We've seen some amazing organizations, and they've been talking about the stuff that they do, like Mifalot and Equalizer and Perez. And it's been fascinating for us because projects are doing great things. And it's about sharing those good things. And it's about sharing it with each other because it is a network, and this is how we're going to learn. There has to be a balance between passion and proof. Now, there are hundreds of amazing sport for development organizations all around the world that are very, very passionate, but they can't prove it. There's no facts to back it up. As much as we love them, we're probably not going to fund them. But it also works the other way around. I don't want a 20-page report with all your numbers and nothing else. If you have no heart, this isn't going to work either. So it's very much about how you show it. If you cannot explain your impact in a page, a tweet, a photograph, then you're probably not doing it right. So it's about putting some thinking into it. And then finally, communicate your results. As a sector, we are notoriously bad at doing this. Everybody else is brilliant about shouting about all the good stuff they do. We do great stuff and we don't tell anybody we're doing it. So think about your audience. Everybody wants something slightly different. Your funders, the people who give you money, want evidence of impact. They want numbers and they want softer stuff. What about your stakeholders, your volunteers? Maybe they want to be appreciated. They want a mini CV. They want a case study. What does the media want? They want some great pictures and a human interest piece. What do your directors want? Your board of trustees, they want to know that you have a plan. So it's taking all of the stuff that you've already collected and just messaging it in the right way. It's communicating it in the right way. We are part of a big network of organizations. I mean, we're a big funder in the UK. We work with over 550 organizations internationally. We have some amazing partners like Beyond Sport and Street Football World and Oaks who have their own expertise. They know how to get more funding. They know how to help with marketing and comms. They know how to introduce you to the right people, as do we. So if anybody wants to know anything specific, a specific area that you want to talk about, feel free to come talk to us. We'll be able to introduce you to your English equivalent, if you like, introduce you to some of these network bodies that can really help you, share some of this best practice between our countries and our organizations, and hopefully start to really prove that sport is making a difference.
I have a question. What is the most important data that I need to, like, if I can't You said a lot of things that we need to. If I want to start from somewhere, where would you tell me to start?
I would start with the numbers. The best place to, if you're not doing anything if you're not doing anything at the moment, start with attendances, names and details and demographics of people you're engaging with. Because unfortunately, if you don't have that, you don't know anything. Is it the same kids that are coming back? What are the age groups you're working with? So that's your starting point. If you're struggling with that, then ask questions. Often you can self-evaluate. How are things going? Ask your participants, ask your kids. That's probably the best place to start.
Funding projects that are intervention, or also, for example, scientific conference that also can have an impact.
Yeah, absolutely. More and more, so this field, this area, so evaluation is becoming really popular at the moment. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it wasn't a thing. Nobody would ask any questions. Sport was great, we love it, we give it some money, it's done. Now, actually, we're having to focus on it quite a lot, and there's a lot of research being done. So we work with a lot of universities, and that's a really good place to start. External evaluators, researchers, getting universities involved. So you're looking at the academic side of it, what is working and what isn't, and comparing it to your project. The problem with that is it tends to be expensive, and it tends to be time consuming. You're not going to get answers, but it's the perfect way to do it. You're not going to get answers in 6 months or in a year even. That's a long-term commitment you're making. It's a commitment you should be making, but at a starting point, I would start easier and then work your way up.
Technical time-consuming question. You talk about the service that you give to children before and after the practice. So how is it done?
Yeah, great question. We have tried to do it in a variety of different ways. So you can email it to them if they're older and you have their email. You can fill it out on their behalf, so on the phone. You can sit in front of them and do it. You can print it and do it on paper. You can send it out and it's anonymous. There's a bunch of different ways. Our logic to this is you have to find a way that works for you. So we've given you 10 different ways. Sometimes with big groups, so one of the ways we do it, we call it a hands-up survey. So it's an easy way to do a large number. How many of you feel, and they put their hands up. Now, it's not great in terms of methodology because it's not very accurate, but objectively, if you're just trying to get a snapshot, you start off with that, and then you survey them individually. Paper seems, for a lot of our organizations, paper is the way to do it. A lot of our organizations use smiley faces for small children, so you make it as complicated as you want to make it. But the point is it needs to be done because otherwise you're not going to know any different.
From what I understood from what you said, Upshot is something that Football Foundation developed once it developed the organization. Is it only for the Football Foundation funders, or is it a system that everyone uses now? And do you see in other countries the same apps developing in the field of sports?
Really good question as well. Yeah, so we developed it initially for us to use in-house. We are a massive organization. We had a need, we built it for us. We found very quickly that there was demand. Other organizations wanted to use it. So now we work with 550 organizations who have nothing to do with the Football Foundation. They effectively just use our system to do their own work and they license it off us. So there's a big model on that side all over the world with organizations doing that. So anybody can use it. There's parts of the system that most of the system you can tailor. We have it in, really randomly, in Portuguese and in Welsh at the moment, but the idea is you can have it in any language you want. We're having a lot of conversations about Hebrew, obviously. In theory, it's your system. You do what you want with it. We help you. We hold your hand. We support you because we have the experience of doing it. In terms of the other countries, it's an interesting one. In the UK, it's very big. When we built it, it didn't exist for sport. There are systems out there that do these things. There's CRM systems that you can do these things with, but they're not for sport. They're for project management. They do all these other things. We didn't want any of those things. We wanted something for us, for something that understood what we were trying to achieve. We're starting to see in the US, so we do a little bit of work in the US, we're starting to see apps that do some stuff, so taking attendances and things, but not to this extent. But we spent a lot of time and a lot of money on it. So for us, this is, it's a work in progress. We continue to build every month. We have a little pot of money we're allowed to spend on the system, and we do it from feedback. So each of our 550 organizations tells us, we like this, we don't like that. In our country, this is important, we want this, and we constantly build and develop. Because for us, and we're very lucky, we're a charity, we're an NGO. We don't need to make a profit, so we're able to do this because we think it's good for the sector, because it makes us look good, because it makes our funders happy. So it's very much a work in progress. I think it's going to get bigger and bigger.
The system side of things. Do you have any standards for which organization can work with you, or does anybody who wants to, no matter what he does?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. We only work with community organizations, so national nonprofits. So we wouldn't really work with we'd never work with a commercial organization unless it's a corporate CSR scheme. So Barclays Spaces for Sport, which was a huge 11-year project, everything was evaluated through Upshot, but that's because they were trying to do good in the community. So that's our line in terms of standards. Yeah, I know. But for us, it's whoever wants to use it absolutely can. We actually do a lot of work. We started to do more work in non-sport as well. So as long as it's still community, we work with universities, for example. We work in the health sector. We work in the criminal justice sector. So not necessarily sport at all, predominantly sport. But as long as you're trying to do something in your community that's making people's lives better, effectively you could use the system. In terms of size, no. We have organizations that's one guy working in his garage running a project and doing really well. And we have huge organizations, huge governing bodies of sport that are working in 20 different countries and measuring everything. So the range is massive.